Winning the complex, chaotic, competitive business world during the week starts in your weekend. Here in Bisnomics, we intend to prepare you to face the challenges of tomorrow's business world today. Welcome to your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Tharundu Amarasekara. Ever since Beyonce's hit single, Who Run the World, was launched, and when that question is now thrown to audiences, the answer expected is girls. Well, make no mistake, they are on a mission to take over the world. Might not be a bad idea. A recent research shows more equal opportunities for women to participate in education and economic activities can add up to $20 trillion to the global economy. Now, how about that? Today, on Bisnomics, we intend to discuss the real issues that women are facing, especially when it comes to economic contribution, and what can we do as a country to go beyond the talk, to walk the talk, and make sure that the women of Sri Lanka get an equal opportunity to contribute to this country's economy. And joining me for this discussion, very colorful discussion I would say, is three wonderful ladies, and we start off the first segment with Professor Arosha Adhikaram, who is a professor in Human Resources Management. Professor Arosha, welcome to Bisnomics. Pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Professor Arosha, let's cut to the chase. Can we as a country be happy and satisfied with the level of economic opportunities which are open for the women in Sri Lanka? You're someone who is out there working with these women. You see them transforming from students to business leaders, but you also have a better idea of the real picture, both in the university side as well as in the corporate world. Tell us all about it.
Well, certainly we have a long way to go. We do boast a lot about having the first prime minister in the world being a lady in Sri Lanka, and then we also talk about a female president being elected in the country. And we do talk about several females who head organizations. But then when we really look at the statistics, we see that the contribution to the economy from females are really low, not because they don't want to contribute, but because mainly because they are not given the opportunity. If you look at the statistics, you would know that we have 51.6% of the population being women. But then when we look at the labor force participation, it's only 34.5% of females being participating in the labor force.
We clearly have a problem.
We clearly have a problem. And then we look at the unemployment. We have more females being unemployed, 7.4% of females being unemployed. And then when we look at the underemployment, again, there are more females being underemployed. And we can also look at economically inactive population in the country. And from that population, we have about 73.7% of the economically inactive population being females. And the interesting part is from them, 67% or 63% or so are inactive because they have to engage in household activities.
The unpaid for, underappreciated work of the economy.
Yes. So, but then when we look at the females who graduate from universities, we have more females graduating from universities. We have 71% or so of those who graduate from universities being females. So, you know, you look at those statistics, there definitely is. And then of those who have a degree and are unemployed, females are the most, the larger group are the females. So, when you look at all these statistics, it's very clear that we do have an issue. But then the issue doesn't stop there. When you know, women would enter the labor force and they would go up to a certain level and then they stagnate, they do not go to the levels beyond.
Are you talking about this invisible glass ceiling?
Yes, glass ceiling, we have glass walls, we have glass cliffs, we have so many glasses blocking our advance. And so if you look at director boards of these companies, you would see very rarely that you would see a woman being there in the leadership positions. So all this indicate that women are not, you know, actively contributing to the economy.
Understood.
And the other thing is, we know that a lot of our population or girls and boys do get the opportunity for free education. So you go up to the university level with free education, where the country spends billions of rupees, and then of 71% who graduate, most of them are unemployed. What would be the?
It's a waste of an economic resource as well.
Resources. So
in fact, this is where I want to throw this question to you. Now, my mother, she said that in her era, she was told you can do A-levels, but on the promise that you are not going to university even if you are selected. We had an era like that as well, but I think we've come a long way where now the young girls also, they want to enter university, they want to be a part of the workplace. In fact, as a lecturer myself, when I meet both male and female students, the amount of ambition that the female students are having is absolutely amazing, and it's spiraling in an increasing way. But let's talk about the role of men. What role do you think men have to play in Sri Lanka in order to give more opportunities for the ladies to contribute more to the economy?
I don't know whether it's the role of the men alone. I think it's the role of the society. It's the role of men and women in the society that needs to help females to contribute to the society, not only the men and women, but organizations as well. We know that there are a lot of organizations where their culture is very stifling. You know, they have very inflexible working hours, work norms. So it is difficult for women to enter, remain in these workplaces, because with our culture we do have gender role stereotyping beliefs, and there are roles that men has to do, women has to do, and then we have this role that we need to play at home.
As you said, there are a lot of stereotypes where they think, okay, these are activities that women should be doing. Now, although in a more urban setup, I think with more exposure to globalization, I believe now men are also coming to the realization that, you know, we need to share duties equally, even within the household. But do you see a problem in the fact that more than 80% of Sri Lanka is actually rural, and some of these stereotypes are still very strong in some of these rural areas? Do you actually see that?
Well, it's not only in the rural areas, definitely it might be more, but it is commonly seen in urban areas as well. And it depends on the person, no? How the person has been socialized and internalized these gender ideologies. So with that, you when you don't have a supporting culture, organizational culture, and a flexible organizational culture, you would be reluctant to remain in work or to go, you know, climb the career ladder.
Understood.
And because, you know, you have to work, finish work at a certain time, come back, and you have all the housework to engage in. But of course, there are families where both husband and wife do contribute equally, and those, I would say, are where the productivity of both the individuals are at the highest.
For sure.
But that, I think, is still quite low.
The exception rather than the norm.
Norm, I would say, yes.
Professor, let's talk about our education system. Now, as you very correctly said, yes, the education opportunities are there, but how inclusive is the education? Because we still hear about cases where the elder girl in the family gives up her education and stays back home, maybe to look after the little ones because the mother has maybe gone abroad for work or something like that. Whenever the family is under pressure, we see that the girls making the sacrifices, and as a result, I believe the amount of inclusiveness in our education system is still at a bit of a low point. What can we do to really make it more inclusive, give more opportunities for these girls to be educated? And from a policy perspective, do you see any policy changes needed, especially to open up the education system more to the women of this country? Now,
if you take the situation that you spoke about, I think it's more to do with the society's gender role stereotyping and the ideologies more than the education system itself, because the education system, if you take for decades, it has been equal, it has provided equal opportunities. We have actually more girls being educated than boys. So I don't see, in terms of providing equal opportunities, I don't see anything wrong with the education system. But of course, there are a lot of drawbacks in our education system that needs to be corrected. We'll put aside the unemployment because our students are not geared towards employment, all that, we put all that aside. If we take gender aspect, even though a boy or a girl would have equal opportunity to be educated, the problem arises when the teachers are not sensitized about gender ideologies, gender role stereotyping beliefs, and they then tend to pass on or socialize the students on various gender ideologies which would restrict,
Quite an unfortunate system.
very, which would restrict the females' ambitions or their career expectations. You know, we have these gender-based career expectations, careers that are suitable for women, careers that are more suitable for men. So even if a young girl would want to, go to a masculine sort of a career, or a career that is believed to be more suitable for men, that would be discouraged from the teachers and even home sometimes. So maybe what we need to think more in terms of gender in education is to ensure that we have the teachers and educators being more sensitive about gender and gender socializing and socialization, and about gender ideologies, and ensure that you don't instill those beliefs and norms in students so that they are self-restricted sometimes.
Understood. So it's a very valid point. The system is open for everyone, it's in how we deliver. So I believe even the educators, the lecturers have a major role to play in this.
Definitely.
Professor, on a final note, I would like to ask from you with regard to the balancing of work and family life. I mean, this is easier said than done, I am sure. You yourself, you are a busy professional and you have to balance so many things. Any tips and advice on that? I know this is very subjective from person to person, but your thoughts?
Well, you are right, it is subjective, so it will be very easy for me to sit here and say this is how I balance my work, and I do balance it. It can be very easy for me to say that, but the circumstances are different for individuals. So what I say might not actually be what the others, would not match the circumstances of somebody else. But if I am to tell you what I believe in is, and what I do is, I always say this wherever I go, I don't try to be a perfectionist. I try to excel in what I do. There is a huge difference between trying to be a perfectionist and trying to excel in what you do. So when you are trying to be a perfectionist, it's very difficult. It puts a lot of pressure on you. But when you are trying to excel in what you do, it becomes quite easy. You do what you need to do as well. And so I'm not trying to be a perfect individual in my different roles. I might have my drawbacks in my work. I might have my drawbacks in my home life.
We all do.
We all do. But and also I'm not afraid to seek support. So wherever I need support, I ask for support. And luckily for me, I do get that support. So it's easy for me. But there are a lot of females I know who does not get that support, who does not have the background for them to do everything. There are ladies I know who would get up from at 4 in the morning, cook or do all the housework, go to work, come back, cook, do all the housework, go to sleep at 11, again next morning 4 they wake up.
The unsung heroes.
And then it's easy for us to say do this, that and all of that, but that doesn't apply to them. But so the support system that you give and the understanding is important, and especially the workplaces also, not only the house, the support of others around the person, but the support that you get from the workplaces also matters a lot. But don't try to compare yourself with anybody else. It's very difficult to compare your circumstances with somebody else. So do what you think is right for you, and do what you think is good for you, what makes you happy, and that's all that matters.
I would like to also question you on this on a quick note. You see a lot of students, female students who pass out, who go to the corporate world, but they are hit with that glass wall, glass ceiling, as you said. What's the attitude that they need to have? If you can just give a few words on that, especially a message to all the young girls who are watching the show, who are like thinking, yes, we know what you're saying, we are facing this. What kind of attitude do you need to really break through that, Professor?
I would say for me, to break whatever the glass ceilings that I have come across.
You would have faced quite a few yourself.
Well, I don't know, because like I said, I have not looked at the external to see what is, why who is blocking me, or having gone into detail on that. I have known what I want to achieve,
Yes.
and that's my goal. And the external parties, procedures, all that is irrelevant to me. I know where I want to go. I have known what I need to gain to get there, and I have not been afraid to pursue that dream and to stand up for my rights. And if there is a place that I had needed to speak out, I have done it. I do speak out for my colleagues, female younger colleagues. And so, you have your goal and you go there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable thoughts with us, Professor, and wish you good luck for all your endeavors in the future.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you, Tarindu.
How do you build your brand as a lady? How do you make sure that you project your image in a different way, in a way that gets noticed? And most importantly, how do you make sure that you stand tall in this competitive world? Let's talk about that on the other side of this break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Let's talk about creating our own brand. They always say, be your own brand. Now, when it comes to women in the workplace, how much does this hold true? And how can you create your own brand? And we have with us here today to talk about it, Ms. Sudashini Christopher, who is a sustainability and reputation consultant. Sudashini, welcome to Bisnomics.
Thank you, Tarindu. Thank you for inviting me
Pleasure.
for this show.
Sudashini, let's talk about building your own brand. Now, especially now you're a marketer, you're a brand curator. Now, for women in the workplace, how can they create their own brand in the corporate world?
So definitely, I think this applies to all. It's not a gender specific thing where you create a brand. So if a person is creating a brand, it's personal branding, and then when it applies to an organization, it becomes corporate branding. So the essence of this branding and how you create it has 6 elements, in my opinion. So I'll take you through one by one. First is the purpose. It's very important that you define who you are and what your purpose is. In here, I'm relating it to personal branding, and which can be applied to corporate brands as well. So you need to define who you are and what makes yourself. So that should be crystal clear. You should even write it down if you want to achieve certain goals in your life and to move forward. And then number 2 is living those values. So
go beyond just writing it.
Exactly. So to have the purpose at core, there are some elements and values for you to live by and make it a lifestyle, make it a habit every day. So when you do that over time, it creates an identity. That's number 3. This identity is something that people can see, and when you start living your values, living your lifestyle, and it becomes the lifestyle, it's automatically created. Identity is more attached to the culture in organization that forms the culture. So it's very important that there is no gap, and people should align themselves to the purpose and their identity.
So what you're saying is that when you start to live your brand values, what you define in the second stage,
yes,
then the society begins to associate you with those values, and that creates your identity.
Yeah. Before going into the society, you yourself identify yourself as, I am this person, and I keep telling that, and which leads to the next step. The 4th is projecting it, communicating it. It should be done internally and externally. When it comes to corporates, internal, external is easy to kind of like differentiate. But when it comes to personal branding, you need to communicate that to yourself, be self-aware of who you are and all that, and keep consistently talking about it, and talking about it with your family, friends circle, which makes, the pack. And then that kind of like, builds the visualization of who you are. The visual branding element plays a role in that, which over time creates the image of you, the branding image people call. So the final step, the sixth one, is it builds reputation over time. So when you see brand image and brand reputation, earlier days people spoke about brand image building and brand building. Now people speak about the reputation, building the reputation. There is a difference. So in my opinion, brand image is what people perceive of you, what they think of you, what they feel about you, what are the emotions when they think, what are the emotions they feel when they, you know, think
about
of you.
you as a person,
Yeah.
like let's say Sudashini, Christopher, what do people think?
Exactly. And then reputation is something, what do they speak of you when you're not in the room? So
That's very important.
That's very important, and that's very hard to shape. So it's very easy for brands to have these goals and, you know, milestones, set it and, you know, achieve that. But it's very difficult to sustain the reputation, and that's where it's very important, you know, you align yourself throughout this process.
In fact, why I asked this, Sudashini, was, as you know, earlier when Professor Arosha spoke about how women are facing so many obstacles in the corporate world, especially when trying to progress. Does having a strong brand built for yourself help to beat some of those obstacles?
In my opinion, I'd say in corporate world, it's not just women who are facing, you know, men are also equally facing. But men and women, when you take, it's a competitive environment, you know. Men are more
I really
used
like how
to,
you are referring to the equal battleground.
yes, it's an equal battleground. It's very highly political, highly competitive environment. So it's like, you know, the survival of the fittest, you know. So women, what they should do is, like, you know, they should inculcate certain attributes, train themselves to not give up, you know. So brand building is not something that you know focus, put it on paper and kind of like mechanically achieve, but you have to be true to yourself. You need to be, you know, authentic to yourself. You need to find who you are first and foremost and define yourself. That will not allow another person stepping in and defining yourself, you know, so that confusion and all that. So people will see you differently.
Is this why we see, for example, some sports celebrities, we see that they are not, let's say, the most holy people going under the sun, but then again, they are very open about it, and people tend to love them because they are like, okay, look, you know what, he's true to himself and he is who he say he is, and we are fine with that. We sometimes, I think, as you very correctly said, if a person is true to himself in what he or she is as a brand, I think people begin to genuinely see that, isn't it? And people connect with that.
Exactly, and authenticity brings differentiation to any culture, the diversity. So the diversity matters. So any organization should welcome this diversity and include everyone if they want to have, like, you know, a lot of higher productivity, best outcomes.
Sudashini, now we as a country, we are sometimes very happy to talk about global issues. And we see a lot of Sri Lankans talking about, for example, some of the global movements that came, for example, the Me Too movement, and these days there's a lot of talk about the royal family, etc. But amidst all these attention toward these global issues, are we losing focus on the sinister dangers that women are facing in the Sri Lankan corporate world? What are your thoughts on that?
Me Too movements and all that, I don't think it's allowing us or leading us to lose focus. It's, on the other hand, it's encouraging us. It's another platform. So with these social engagement, social movements, people are openly discussing about the issues, challenges. So it's like a joint force. You work together. So you find, you know, advocates. So you're not alone in there. So you fight together. So it's always adds value to what you do. It's basically to face the fear and all that. But another thing you talked about is the sinister dangers and the workplace harassments and stuff.
In Sri Lanka?
In Sri Lanka, yeah. So I think that's something that is available in anywhere, in any place, globally as well, in locally as well. So if you have right policies, right practices in the company, not just in paper, but in reality.
Practiced.
Yeah, in reality. The culture will allow people to, you know, kind of like face that, you know, without like, you know, putting them down or without suppressing them. And it shouldn't be a taboo topic in office environment. It really shouldn't be a taboo topic, because when it comes to sexual harassment and bullying and all that, I mean, when you're outside the organization, it's easy to talk about it, but when you're inside the organization, you can't talk about, because you will be seen differently. It may have it may have caused fears in terms of how it would impact your performance, how it would impact your career. So HR has a huge role to play in it, and I'm definitely sure there are a lot of organizations who do that. A lot of HR great practices that allow people to kind of like, face those situations.
And openly talk.
Yeah, yes.
And do you see an upward trend in more and more organizations encouraging these policies where people are allowed to openly talk about these things?
Definitely, yes.
Interesting. Sudashini, let's talk about the certain, I would say, tips that you would like to share with a young girl who is watching this show, who is entering the workforce, when it comes to protecting herself from those dangers. Like, for example, someone who is watching this show might be actually at a breaking point where, she's wondering, okay, am I to tolerate this harassment anymore, or should I expose them, or should I leave the company? How do you make that decision? What is your advice to ladies who may be actually silently suffering from some of these harassment issues, and maybe the organization doesn't really have a proper support system? Because as you said, many large organizations may be having these policies, but especially small to medium scale enterprises, which is the bulk of our economy, they might not be having those progressive policies. What's your advice to these women?
So again, women suffer more or less, and then men also suffer, right? Men compared to women have this fighting spirit, competitive and sportive way of like, tackling it. Women on the other hand kind of like give up or be told to give up. So I think it should not be tolerated. To answer your question, definitely no. Whether it should be exposed, yes, it should be exposed. It should be professionally dealt, right? And then you asked, whether a person should stay in or leave, right? That comes to the point of, how whether it's bringing peace of mind to me, whether it's, emotionally healthy for me to be in that environment or situation, and based on that one should take a call, right, whether to leave or whether to stay in fighting. Like you said, if it's an organization, a well-built organization, you can, change your career to another function and work in, that's fine. But if it's like a small medium and you can't, survive and you can't face this anymore, you shouldn't compromise on your emotional well-being and stay in there. But one thing you asked about the advice that I could give, right?
For sure.
So I think you should never give up. You should never give up, meaning it doesn't mean that you should stay in and, tolerate that. You should not tolerate, but you should never give up on yourself. You should fight for yourself. You should fight for your objectives. You should fight for your purpose, right? And then make sure that, things, if somebody's bringing harm to you, if somebody's trying to abuse you, you should say no, clear and loud. And more on these situations, people try to do this, perpetrators try to do this in private. They don't do it public out there. So you need to kind of be resilient when this kind of situation happens. You need to train yourself beforehand, think of how you could respond without, like, mostly women, they kind of face this situation and they freeze in that moment. They are more in shock, which allows a perpetrator.
How do you overcome that shock? How do you take that action? Because as you very correctly said, most of the cases that are getting reported, it's maybe where a young female employee is returning back from office function, and maybe at that point the particular supervisor or someone has made an unnecessary move. And you, as you very correctly said, yes, you need to have yourself prepared. But Sudashini, how do you really be prepared to, come out of that shock and respond and protect yourself?
So I have faced situations like that in my life, right, personally and also in corporate life. So it's just part and parcel of it. People are there to, try and, bring damage to you, but you would not allow that to yourself. And you play these scenarios in your mind as to how you would overcome. And most important thing is, if you don't have the guts, if you don't have the voice, you find voice among yourself in your network. You have to call out for help, call out for your male friends, family people, around you, female friends and family around you for help, who can be that voice for you. You know, I've been supporting role to many of my friends in certain situations when it comes to personal life and also in corporate life. And another aspect is, it's very, like I said, it's very important to kind of form the support system who will be your voice and action in such situations. And finally, it's also important to know your facts, know what brings you justice, what's right and what's not right. You should know, and you should know all the information around. If it's a workplace, you should know the workplace policies, the employee entitlements, what's the route you can take. So information is wealth. You should do your homework. Anybody, any person, it's not just women, a man or a woman, before entering into a corporate, if that's what your objective or aim is, you should read about how the culture is, you should speak to a couple of people and see whether this would fit you, and even if you're in, right, you should know your information in hand, which then you can, you know, support to defend yourself.
Understood.
And get out of it.
Some very valid thoughts there, Sudarshini, especially in terms of facing some of these challenges and how you stay prepared, how you find your own voice. I think you made some excellent points there. Thank you very much for joining us today and sharing your thoughts. Wish you good luck with all the future endeavors that you are getting into.
Thank you, Tarindu.
Coming up on the other side of this short break, how can women prepare themselves for leadership positions and go to the top? Let's talk about that after this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics. Women in the workplace, how can we empower them to contribute more to the Sri Lankan economy? That is the focus of Bisnomics today. Now, we've looked at some of the basic problems. We've also looked at how can you create your own brand in the workplace. Now let's talk about women in leadership. How can women make it to the top? And what do they bring differently to the table? To discuss about this and more, I have with me joining for this discussion Ms. Shriyangani Dhanapala. Shriyangani, welcome to Bisnomics. Absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Ayubowan. And thank you for having me.
Shriyangani, you come with a lot of experience in the hospitality sector. Yes. And at a fairly young age, you've made it to the top. You've made it to quite a senior management position in a leading resort chain. My question to you, when women come to the leadership position, senior leadership positions, because we debate about this, we say that there is not enough representation, that there are not enough opportunities, even Professor Arosha mentioned the same thing. Yes. My question to you is, what is it that they bring differently to the table when they are appointed to senior leadership positions?
Okay, I have a twist to that as an answer.
We love twists, so go for it.
So my question is, why should a woman bring something different into the table if she's coming for leadership? When leadership expectations in an organization, whether it's corporate, whether it's government sector, wherever you go, expectations are genderless. So what matters is delivery at the end of the day, the vision that you have, the drive that you have, how quick are you in grasping the business, understanding different dynamics that can come into play, how applicable are your skill set to the organization, what sort of value addition can you bring in. These are the things that are expected out of any sort of a leader. So I wouldn't say a woman sitting on a table versus a man has no difference, because the expectations are similar. But yet again, the twist there is, can women sit on a table? Are they given with the rightful setup, opportunities? If that is the expectation, that has to be there. It's not about what they bring to the table, it's about coming to the table. Once they come to the table, they should be able to raise their hand and speak up. So that's the sort of, freedom that you need to have, or like empowerment, the so-called empowerment that we say that women should have. And also, if you reach to that level, there's this thing called a domino effect. Right?
Domino effect.
Yeah. So once you reach to the top, it's your duty to create that ripple effect so that more and more opportunities can be created.
Now, let's talk about senior level representation of women being low in Sri Lanka, because we've heard this echoing message. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see that as a problem in Sri Lanka, where the representation of women at senior management and board levels is low, or do you see actually an improving trend where now the times are changing? What do you think about it?
For me, it's a yes and a no answer. Like Professor Arosha said, like from producing the first female prime minister to the world, how long have we taken, to come into where we are, and what have we have actually done?
Do you see this to be a Sri Lankan problem, where we are
No.
quite stuck in the past, and we are happy to talk about the past, first female prime minister, but as you said, what have we done after that?
I think this particular topic about women coming forward in leadership in any spectrum is a global issue. It's not Sri Lanka. Like, even if you see the Fortune 500 companies, only about 7% of it has female representation when it comes to CEO level positions. If you take Colombo Stock Exchange, all the companies that are listed, you will see about only 9% of women taking big board seats coming in. So that's the reality. So globally to Sri Lanka, there's no big difference. But yet again, I would say there are trailblazers, especially recently. And for the first time in Sri Lanka, a listed public company had a female CEO being appointed, and you see in a tough time like this for tourism, that tourism department, like the authority being headed by a female, and also like the appointment of the first female DIG, right? These are big, and you do see some minimum amount of resistance coming from a minority of people who might have different levels of power
and different
agendas, of course. But what matters is the amount of good reception that these topics are having right now, and the inspiration that they bring in for youngsters to look up.
Absolutely.
So I think
I think the public is quite supportive of this,
Of course, like if you check the sentiments like in online platforms to whatnot, all you see is a lot of support, love, like a nurturing environment, and people are very, very appreciative of these achievements. But these are not overnight things that has happened. It's a lot of hard work, I'm quite sure, a lot of commitment and passion that has come in. I don't think for male or female there's like a straight journey. Nothing comes to your hand like that, in a platter. It's of course a lot of work, but I mean, for me, I'm very lucky to be surrounded in a very nurturing environment where I work, but it's not the case for many other individuals that are there. So in a generic sense, what I would say is this can apply for young boys as well. This advice applies to all, but for girls, first figure out what you want in life, as Professor Arosha also said. That's what I did for myself. What do I want? Whom do I want to become? It might be like so far away from where you are right now.
I think this also resonates with what Sudashini said as well.
Exactly.
Where she said, figure out what you want to be. Even before thinking about branding, what are your values, and live those values.
Completely right. And then once you know what you want to become, you will have certain thresholds in life, or like things that curve your journey, like marriage, motherhood, doing higher education, which will give you different dynamics and also will require or push you to think in different perspectives about life, the choices that you make. But if you have your end goal in mind, this is what I want to become, you will start to navigate through your journey. And
you mean say you will also begin to realize what's important and what's not.
Exactly.
What's going to help me to get to my goal, and what should I avoid.
Exactly, and of course work life matters a lot, but yet again I think especially for women in that sense, mentoring can play a huge role. The right advice from right people, those are not your friends, you shouldn't be talking to people who are in the same level of mindset. You should go and look up, talk to someone who has that amount of maturity, get the right advice, know where you're walking. You might find rocks on your way, you might find blocks on your way, but make that navigation because you know where you want to go.
On a final note, I would like to ask you, women empowerment, this is a very much spoken about word, and in some organizations you see it being spoken about but hardly any action taken.
Yes.
For anyone from the HR sector who is watching this show today, how do you come out of that being just a phrase, a catchphrase in your organizational policies, and you have it as an actionable set of policies? How do you make it happen?
Yeah, so I have this very simple analysis on what's happening in a very, public forum, So there are women empowerment, there are like 3 areas that people talk about. Women empowerment is possible, you can do it. That's one side of the story.
Talking about it.
But figure it out yourself at the end of the day. And then you have this like, very negative, oh my God, it's such a scary topic, so much of negative things. And
Taboo topic, let's talk
exactly,
about.
it's so scary, right? Stay away from it. And then you have the third bucket saying, no, women empowerment is possible, you can have female leadership, but this is how much it's going to cost. You need to invest, right? So, talking in silos about this topic is not going to give you an answer. You need to find the real balance in between all
and,
3.
Shriyangani, let me get this right, and I don't know whether you'll agree with me on this. It also has to be way beyond just a company event once a year on one day.
Yes. Oh yes, it's I find it very cliche, putting a pink everywhere and saying that it's Women Day, we celebrate women. No, celebrate women every day by meticulously thinking on what, you need to have ambassadors who constantly make this their journey to, implement these things in an organizational context, and you need to invest capital into it. And you need to have empowerment, motivation, building culture, killing egos, breaking stereotypes, all of these.
Changing attitudes.
Creating that buy-in is a massive process, and it can't be like one day I talk about it, pass it on to some other person, Women's Day is coming, talk about it out loud, and then it dies the next day. So, it's a commitment. It's an organizational commitment, and I think it largely starts with the leadership. It starts all the way from the top. If there is good direction given saying female representation is important, there's much more amount of work that you need to do, strategic thinking that you need to do. And there you see certain industries, I'm not talking about senior level leadership, breaking these barriers. Apparel industry is a good one, right?
Correct.
It's a good example where they have broken all these stereotypes, they're bringing all these girls to work, right, have created that reputation in the industry. I think tourism is also a similar industry making improvements, but there's again scope for improvement. So, it's a long term journey that is there altogether. So, those 3 areas that I was referring to, do not stick into one bucket and say
Understood.
This is what it is. Just try to find the right mix, have the right commitment, and then you can go in that journey.
Shriyangani, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, especially your own experience and how you think things should be done. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. Wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Tarindu.
A journey of 1,000 miles always starts with a few steps. Women empowerment, giving more opportunities for women to be a part of Sri Lankan economic activities is a long-term journey. But we need to start taking the steps today. And the 3 ladies we had joining with us today, Professor Arosha Adhikaran and Sudashini Christopher and Shriyangani Dhanapala, shared their thoughts on what needs to be done, what changes are needed, and most importantly, what attitudes do we need to have as individuals and as a society to make this a more progressive, productive country where women can have more opportunities to participate in our economy. I hope that in your organizations these changes will be brought about and all of us could contribute towards making Sri Lanka a more progressive country. I will see you with the next episode. This is your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes, Bisnomics.